kleine aus das, was wir.
Hello and welcome to the Ayurveda Report. Today's show features Srivatsa Ramaswami, a student of Krishnamacharya for over 30 years, one-on-one. One of the senior-most students of yoga in the world today, an authority whose clarity, wisdom, and humility is unmatched in my experience in the realm of asana practice, pranayama, and the understanding of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Ramaswamy shared with me some of the most wonderful remembrances and recollections about studying with Krishnamacharya, as well as how Krishnamacharya used yoga to heal people, and also some of the unique spiritual qualities that Krishnamacharya rolled into the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the presentation of that based on the pursuit of sattva, which is a very important part of the Vaishnava path, of which Krishnamacharya was an emblematic scholar. In this interview, we talk about healing, yoga's power to heal the body. And Ramaswamy talks about Krishnamacharya's approach, and he gives and shares with us some of the most wonderful remembrances and recollections about studying with Krishnamacharya.
From Chikitsa point of view, or health point of view, I would rather call it as arogya or health point of view, apart from the asanas are necessary because the skeletal muscles are to be exercised so that blood circulation to the skeletal system is good. But then there is a lot of muscles, lots of tissues inside the body, and you take the heart, the lungs, and the stomach. They are
critical,
critical
tissue,
right? So they have to be attended to, and then and if you really look at that, the way pranayama does a lot. Not only it helps the respiratory system, it helps indirectly the heart, because the heart also is in the thoracic system. So this aspect of Krishnamacharya's teaching appealed to me most. That is one reason why our pranayama, the bandhas are important. The inversions like Shirsasana, headstand, and Sarvangasana, they also become very important.
Mm-hmm. Are there some examples that you remember from watching him work with people?
Of course, this is the general approach to health, and then he will apply to individuals depending upon their requirements. I remember a 8-year-old girl, who came to him for the scoliosis. 8-year-old girl, the way he treated her, different arm positions, different breathing, so that in a matter of about 15 days or so, you could see substantial improvement in that. He specifically asked me to come and observe how he was teaching that girl, and he will manipulate with the different asanas. For instance, he would use the Shalabhasana or Dhanurasana. Shalabhasana or Bhujangasana, and then keep the arms in different positions so that he'll be able to manipulate it, and then
to keep the spine going more straight.
Right. And then in addition to that, he would use the breathing, because you are able to stretch the spine from within with breathing. Otherwise there is no traction possible. The whole thoracic spine, you can't move unless you are able to stretch from within. That's done by breathing. So these are a number of ways. And then he also would treat people, and there is a view that the various organs in the body, they get displaced from their original position. Heart tends to sag. We have the condition like the prolapse of the uterus. Right. Yeah. All these, that is, organs muscles get slack, and then the organs tend to move away from their intended positions. So yoga, one of the reasons why inversions were used was to get these organs back to their position and put them back to their position with pranayama and the bandhas. So internally we can really access all. So if the organs get displaced, there are 18 marmasthanas, 18 different vital points in the body, and then there are certain measures. So he used to measure the distance between the main organs, and then he will ask, okay, our heart is not in the right position and then suggest
Wow.
methods by it. Yes. So these
and he combined this with his knowledge of the marma as well.
Right,
so,
right.
So he had a very in-depth Ayurvedic perspective.
But marmasthanas are mentioned in the yoga text also.
Oh.
Yeah, for instance, the Yoga Yajnavalkya talks about the 18 marmasthanas, and then one of the methods that is that is used, one of the pratyaharas, and actually refers to the 18 marmasthanas, by which in this you try to draw your prana from the one marmasthana to the next, and then all the way up to the sahasrara.
Interesting.
So like that, it is now. I mean, these ideas are contained in some of the yoga systems, and then he had a vast understanding, and then he would use them, put them into proper use.
But in your teaching, and you've been teaching for 30 years?
Yes, about 30 years.
Yeah, so you probably come across all kinds of students with different sizes and shapes and limitations. How do you deal with class situation, or do you just bring people one-on-one sometimes to work with them?
No, it's a question of, I don't teach on a one-to-one basis. I mean, because right from the beginning, I was teaching in a class situation, so I don't really do on a one-to-one basis, but sometimes people come. In that case, what you've got to do is you've got to take care of the physical requirements, and also sometimes a little bit of meditation, a little bit of chanting, a little bit of the yoga philosophy. It depends upon the condition of the individual. Fortunately, in yoga, it takes care of the physical side, the physiological, the ability to concentrate, and also the spiritual side. So it is possible to combine everything, and then make, prepare a scheme for individuals.
So one of the things that you spoke about recently was the difference between the Vinyasa Krama and the Shikshana Krama and the Chikitsa Krama, that they're methodologies.
Right. You see, if you want to really be a successful Chikitsa Krama, suppose that is a goal. Chikitsa Krama is that try to adopt yoga to individual requirements. Virtually it boils down to that. You try to find out the requirements of an individual, and then see what you can do to help that particular individual. I may have a difficulty in doing a particular posture, or I may have stiffness in my neck, or some problem, some breathing problem I may have, or there can be any number of problems.
Right.
So the whole approach will be for you to find out. But then as a teacher, I do not know who is going to come to you. So you have to learn in the entire, as much as possible, yoga is able to offer. So Shikshana Krama is the way to learn yoga. Suppose you want to learn yoga, that is why you got the various aspects. You must know as many movements as possible, as many asanas and as many movements as possible. So in Vinyasa Krama, what we try to do is we try to teach almost 700 vinyasas, about 150 asanas or so. The whole idea is, it is not as though the student is going to learn all these asanas and going to practice on a regular basis. That will be the resource that the student who is going to become a teacher or a therapist later on.
It's their reference to all the different possibilities.
Yeah. Yes, all the possibilities. And of course, in their own practice, they will have to adapt to their own requirements. And in Chikitsa Krama or Vinyoga Krama, if you want to call it, what you have got to do is, already you see an individual, okay, this individual requires all these things. And then you teach them, and then they practice. Then after a while, you again go back and then see if there is any progress, and then modify the practice until finally you give them a practice which they can keep on doing for, let's say, a year or so. So this adaptation to individual requirements is, you call it as Vinyoga Krama. If they come for some treatment, then you can call it as Chikitsa Krama. But then basically every yoga teacher should have a very strong, just like a medical doctor, if supposing I want to become a gynecologist, it's not sufficient to know only about the uterus and the reproductive system. I still have to study the entire body.
Right, you have to know all the other physiological
because they are all interconnected. Interconnected, and I must have. Likewise, in yoga also, when you are a student, when you want to become a teacher, you must try to get as much information as possible. That is what Shikshana Krama is all about. Shikshana Krama is to teach a student to know this particular subject. I want to learn yoga. So the teacher has to give as much information as possible. That's exactly what Krishnamacharya did. He gave, much more than I can use. But then he gave all the information. And then if you have a variety of asanas, movements and all that, you can adopt into requirements. Supposing you know only about half a dozen asanas or 20 asanas and no movements whatsoever, your choice is absolutely limited. If you can't find a student, if you find a student is unable to do that, you can't do anything about it. You can't adopt individual requirements. Whereas if you know the hundreds of vinyasas that are available, then you can do it. Similarly with respect to pranayama. There are so many different types of pranayama. Whom should I teach Ujjayi? Whom should I do Nadi Shodhana? Whom should I teach the combination? Whom should I teach Kapalabhati? Whom should I teach Bhastrika? All these things become known once I know all the different types of pranayama. And then I must also understand how these various pranayamas operate. What happens? Nadi Shodhana will help the upper respiratory tract. Ujjayi breathing will help the bronchial tubes, Bhastrika will help your lungs proper. Like that, there are each aspect of pranayama has got its own application. So all these things in the Sikshana Krama I must learn.
Right. And then what does it really take to understand the needs of an individual?
Sometime a teacher used to check the nadi, the pulse, and a few other tests, look at the tongue and all, just like a Ayurvedic doctor would do. And then, as I told you, he would measure the distance between the navel, that is the center of the body, to different parts and all that.
Looking at proportions.
Proportion, or proportion, or they have the distance narrowed, all these things he will check. And then prescribe. That is at the physical level. But then then what happens afterwards? You try to find out whether there is any psychological issue. That may be the cause of all these problems. Sometimes we don't pay that kind of attention. So in which case he will try to find out whether the person is has got a religious belief, or if he does not believe in. So depending upon that, he will suggest meditation methods, or he will suggest mantras or whatever. So it's a package.
It's like I think some people would approach yoga from a standpoint of leaving the world, but in the case of being a yoga teacher, it's really about knowing the world and knowing the people and being connected.
You see, that's why yoga is for ihasukha and parasukha. Ihasukha means worldly happiness, parasukha, the out of the world experience or happiness. So that is why it's called a complete system. It's a complete system. It's an Adhyatma Vidya. Everything you want to know about yourself, it is there. It's called an Adhyatma Vidya. There is as I told you, there is the physical aspect of it, and there is interpersonal relationship, how you conduct yourself in the world. The Yama Niyamas take care of that. Then you got the asanas to take care of your body, then pranayama, physiological changes. And ultimately then the philosophy behind that, then the meditation to take care of how to modify the functioning of your mind.
Right.
So, and then ultimately there is what should I do with my mind? What should I be thinking about? What should I be contemplating upon? And that you find in the spiritual aspect of yoga. So you got a complete range in individual needs. So, as a yoga teacher, depending upon the requirement of the individual, that's what happens with Krishnamacharya. When as I told you, when the 8-year-old girl comes there, and then he will treat that girl as if everything what mattered was to correct her the scoliosis. That's all. What the next hour, an older man, 60-year-old man, he was just retired, who would come to him with other complications, maybe high blood pressure or some problem with the family and all. But he will suggest an entirely different thing. He won't talk about too much of asanas. He will still suggest a few movements. So this way, adapting to individual requirements, and then basically, as I tell you, that basically the teacher should be well informed. He should try to get as much resources as possible. Then only you can apply to individual requirements. That I think is something what we have to do if you want to make yoga. Get the best out of yoga system. The teaching should be such that we should be able to get as much information as possible.
Do you think that's happening right now in the spread of yoga?
That may or may not be happening, but then because there is, you teach, you train teachers to teach asanas, and then what do? They become teachers. So because their resources are limited, they try to teach whatever they know. This is what would happen. Mm-hmm. Once you start expanding the what you call base, then naturally people will start, okay, we can try this, we can try this. You see, because all aspects of yoga are interesting. People say the asanas are interesting. I would say pranayama is equally interesting. And so sometimes when I teach sometimes people are able to do 80 times pranayama in one sitting. It takes about 40 to 45 minutes. I mean, if they are not interested, if they are not comfortable, they won't sit and do it for 45 minutes. So that means there is something in pranayama which makes it, something agreeable in pranayama, so that you are able to stay there and do it. Like this sit down and meditation. So it's a question of the teacher, wanting to teach. Once you are able to tell the student these are all available, they will try and they will start getting interested in that. So when I went to Krishnamacharya, I never knew anything about any of these things, but he started slowly, developing interest in that. For initially I went to him for asanas. Then after a month or so he started pranayama. Then afterwards he started teaching me a lot of chanting. Then we went to the philosophy, and application. So over a period of time, you were able to really see the scope of yoga. Unfortunately, I think we are not able to appreciate the entire scope of yoga, because you limit to asanas. You limit to asanas. On the other hand, there are people who say that if meditation will do the trick, but then meditation does not work unless you prepare yourself with asana and pranayama. This is the way. If you don't do asana, you tend to be highly rajasic. The mind doesn't settle down. If you don't do pranayama, the mind is dull. You can't meditate. So that is why in the olden days, asana and pranayama were absolutely necessary before you can sit down and meditate. Mm-hmm. So we have to completely understand how yoga works, and then accordingly learn and then teach.
And also for longevity, because if the project is enlightenment, well, it could take a long time, right? So you want to have a very good body as you age.
That's right. That's the main thrust of yoga. It doesn't merely say that the ultimate goal is the spiritual goal, but then unless you got you have to live a long number of years. You have to take if the body is not strong, if my body is not cooperating, then it is going to be a distraction. Mm-hmm. It is going to distract me. I get sick every 3 days. Where is the point? Next 2 days I won't be able to do anything. My whole concentration, all my mind's energy is going to be taken up by my body. So that is why a yogi should maintain good health, has to maintain good health, so that I am not distracted by my own body. It's no use if I get away from the outside world and then if I am sick, because the sick body is going to drag your mind away from concentration, away from your spiritual thoughts. So one of the reasons why you have to practice asanas is to see that the body is no distraction. My body doesn't distract me anymore. Similarly, when I do pranayama, the mind also becomes less and less tamasic, it is clear, so mind is not going to be a distraction. Then I can meditate very well. Otherwise what happens, there are lots of thoughts going on, mind doesn't settle down. So the yogis have found out different methods by which we can take care of each aspect, so that ultimately I am able to sit down and meditate, whatever I want. Meditate upon my Ishtadevata, or I can meditate upon the ultimate goal of yoga, which is Kaivalya, whatever.
There are a lot of commentaries on the Yoga Sutras, and for a long time, I myself and many other people who have studied them have found them extremely confusing. But hearing you lecture on the Yoga Sutras, all of a sudden everything makes sense. And what's so special about the transmission that you have, that you understand this?
You see, Yoga Sutra is a very, very clearly written text. There is very little ambiguity in it. The thought process is very straightforward. See, the way Krishnamacharya taught Yoga Sutra, the first time what we will do is he will go word by word. He will take each word, Atha, Yoga, Anushasana, and then break that down into the Sama Vigraha. He will break it down so that he can understand the word meaning first. And then we will go to the commentary. So what happens if you know the word meaning correctly and then go to the commentary, you won't deviate from that. On the other hand, nowadays Yoga Sutras are taught by people who have not read the original. They have not studied the original. They have read some commentaries, especially contemporary writers who themselves have not studied the original text. So they read a commentary, then you read 4 or 5 commentaries, and then each one says something. You try to pick that out, and then when you want to interpret it, you may lose. And then Yoga Sutras, what happens is, it's what you call it is condensed writing. Like what I'm saying is, the sutra language is such that if you miss one particular word, you lose track. The sutra means something which is condensed. They take away a lot of unnecessary words. The verbs are not there. So like zip.
It's a compressed file.
Compressed file, yeah. So you got expanded. Each and word you got expand. So, and then according to my guru, it is addressed to 3 different levels of yogis. First chapter is supposed to be for the Uttama Adhikari, that's the born yogis. The second chapter, beginning, is for the entry level yogi. Third, middle of the second chapter, you got the Ashtanga Yoga, which is well known. That is for people who probably would like to spend their entire life, a lifelong yogi. They have made a commitment that just like I want to be a businessman. Some people desire I want to be a yogi. Okay, right. So they go ahead and then they continue to they spend their entire lifetime learning and practicing yoga. So the entire Yoga Sutra is divided into three parts. What you call the top level yogi. So sometimes what happens is, when you take one sutra from the first chapter and then the one from the second chapter and then try to compare, then it's confusing.
Right.
So you got to follow follow the thought process continuously. That is what Krishnamacharya did. He made it very accessible, right? And of course, you have to strive to find out the thread. You got to try to find out the entire logic behind it. It's very logical. Any person, any logical thinking person will be able to understand that there is nothing mysterious about it. It is very sensible. That's what you have got to find. Otherwise, what happens? You try to introduce a lot of mysterious things in it. That's not going to help. There is nothing mysterious about it.
Right. When you studied with Krishnamacharya, it was in Madras, right?
Yes.
So that's after the Mysore days.
Right.
People are talking about how his style of teaching changed from Mysore. And do you know, was that because he was just being employed by the Maharaja and he had to do specific things in that context? What was more natural for him, I think?
No, see, when you are beginning to teach, you teach in a particular way. Over a period of time, you acquire a kind of experience slowly without your own knowledge. You keep on modifying. That could have happened to him. That could have happened to him. Initially, you are very enthusiastic, and then over a period of time, anyway, whatever be the reason. The only yoga I know from Krishnamacharya is what he taught me. So I studied with him on a one-to-one basis, but virtually for the entire duration, except for a few years, a few classes not on asanas, mostly on the text, some chanting with the Deshkacharya, but by and large it was on a one-to-one basis. So I'm surprised that he would have taught yoga in a different way than the way I have been able to. And that's, I'm surprised. See, one thing about, as I told you, he used the breathing breath in all the asana movements. So I'm surprised when somebody teaches yoga without the associated breathing, synchronized breathing, and then if it is supposed to come from Krishnamacharya's, maybe he didn't teach like that in the initial stage. I can't say.
I see.
But then I have not seen him teach anybody without the breathing, without the vinyasas. Not only to me but also to my family members like my father, mother, sister, but also to a few other people whom I have seen him teach. So this was part of his teaching. So I don't know why. Maybe in the early stages people missed. But another thing you got to understand is I spent a lot of time with him. I was there with him for virtually 3 decades. Deshkacharya spent a lot of time. So we have to understand that. I can't. Maybe the earlier teachers missed a few points. That could be because they were there for a short period of time, and then they were very young at that time.
Right.
Whereas I started going to him from when I was 15, and almost I was 50 by the time. So over a period of time, when you spend a lot more time,
I see.
right. So
Right.
it could be the one reason could be that, yeah.
So he was a Vaishnava, right?
Yes.
In the use of the Yajurveda tradition?
Yeah, he belonged to the Ayurveda, Krishna Ayurveda tradition. In fact, our family also belongs to the Krishna Ayurveda tradition. By and large, most of the people in South India, many of them are Krishna Ayurvedis.
And do you remember him as a spiritually focused person? Was he always doing sadhana, or was?
Yes. Apart from the asana pranayama that you see, he was a staunch Vaishnavite. So he had his puja every day. He had his puja, the icons in front of him. Sometime when you go a bit early before the class, you could see him. Doing. So he had his own sadhana. He had, I won't know completely what he was doing, but from what you could see, he had a very strong spiritual practice. It is more oriented towards, we can call it as a religious or a devotional practice, but still, you should understand that his understanding of religious practice and spirituality is that it is not even a bhakti yogi will have to prepare oneself with asana and pranayama. A bhakti yogi also has to be highly sattvic. Without that, bhakti yoga doesn't make much. So,
right.
So you could see that he combined his hatha yoga practice, and then he went for his spiritual. I would call it a spiritual and a devotional. It's a.
What's the difference between spiritual and devotional?
Sometimes if you go to the Raja Yoga, the Patanjali's Raja Yoga, it talks about understanding the true nature of your own self. It doesn't. So yoga chitta vritti nirodha tada drashtu surupi avasthan. So my goal for a Raja Yogi's goal is to understand who really I am. So even if you pray to God so that God will tell you or will show you your real nature.
Right.
That's what the Ishvara Pranidhana in the first chapter is all about. So on the other hand, if you are a very religious person, your goal will be to have a vision of the Lord, or whatever that approach will be there. So there is a difference. Then Patanjali Yoga Sutras, appears to be more oriented towards the spiritual aspect. That is, I want to know who really I am.
Right.
Because according to him, once you know who really you are, the mind is going to be absolutely peaceful. You are not going to take another, you won't transmigrate.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about your own spiritual evolution?
I wouldn't. I could see that. I could see that how I was when I was young, how I am, and there are some slow changes that take place. I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. That's all. That's all I can say. I'm very grateful to my teacher for putting me in this. Without that, I don't know. I mean, yeah, he was a wonderful teacher. The subject yoga is absolutely phenomenal. So if you get a good teacher, and a subject like this, it's bound to do you good. Right.
There's a lot of let's say there's a lot of negative talk about tapasvis and yogis holding their hands up, hatha yogis.
Right.
My personal feeling is that they have the same desires as we do, and not to disrespect them if their form is a little different. Do you find in Indian society growing up, did you hear respect for other different schools of yoga, or was it all just a...
Yeah, unfortunately, people who do the meditation and something like the spiritual, we can call them on the spiritual path, they have a little respect for people who practice only asanas and maybe a little bit of pranayama. But if you look at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, or if you look at the Hatha Yoga Prithvi says, all right, we have got Hatha Yoga so that we can help the Raja Yogis. Okay, so if you take the first, second, and the part of the third chapter, they are consistent with the Raja Yoga goal. But of course, some portion of Hatha Yoga are not completely acceptable to the Raja Yogi. So my guru used to say, all right, Hatha Yoga has got some things which seem to violate the tenets of Raja Yoga, so you ignore them. Take whatever is most suitable as a Raja Yogi, which doesn't conflict with the Raja Yoga goal. So unfortunately, Hatha Yogi, what happens is, because they don't have the Raja Yoga goal, the spiritual goal. There seems to be a roadblock. You can't proceed. So my guru used to say that Hatha Yoga doesn't give you what is the principle, the tattvas. Tattvas involved in that. So that is why. So in India we have got one set of people, the Vedantins and those people who talk about the Upanishads, the Prasthanatrayas and all that. But they don't have they are physically, they don't do any yoga practice, they don't do a little bit of pranayama. By and large, there's intellectual.
Cerebral.
Yeah, cerebral completely. Whereas these people keep on working with their body, like most of the yogis do, the modern day yogis do. Krishnamacharya is one person who married both. This is how it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be. If you want a Raja Yogi, you cannot go on without your Hatha Yoga portion of practice involved in. Supposing I don't do any asana practice, I don't do any pranayama practice, I can't make any progress in spiritual. I can, over a period of time, what happens? The mind keeps on, thinking on these lines, but you don't have the physical strength, nor the mind has the discipline to settle down. So that's not going to work. On the other hand, people who practice only Hatha Yoga, they don't have any principle to follow. So what do? They keep on working with their body, with the breath, breath. And again, that doesn't seem to, So you properly, when you are able to combine these two, that's what Krishnamacharya did. That's what the Yoga Sutras also talk about. The Yoga Sutras say that there are 8 steps to Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. These are by and large taken, by and large you find in the Hatha Yoga approach. So this is again Krishnamacharya's contributions. There he did not want to ignore the benefits of Hatha Yoga. So he practiced Hatha Yoga, he taught Hatha Yoga number, but he didn't stop with that. He, when at least during the later part of his life, he really went out of the way to encourage his students to study the spiritual parts, like the Sankhya Karika or the Yoga Sutra, then the various Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, then lots of chanting. So this is the kind of yoga that will be helpful for everybody. It is not sufficient to do one Hatha Yoga alone or sit down and meditate alone. Both of them won't work.
And one of the things that is important, which you stress in class, is the contribution of the yoga as opposed to sheer physical exercise.
Yes, yes. The yoga has got certain peculiarities. It is a unique physical exercise system. Some of the uniqueness of yoga when compared to others is, at least the way Krishnamacharya taught us, is one thing you would say, you must never strain your heart. The way to help the heart is to work with the other aspects, other physiological aspects like deep breathing. Breathing is like a respiratory pump. It helps to draw blood to the heart. Likewise, the various asanas, not a fixed number of asanas, the various vinyasas, you are able to work with the different muscle groups, and these muscle groups, the pump, just like the muscle pump effect, so that more amount of blood is squeezed out of these muscles. So between these two, you are able to take a lot of load off the heart, at least during the period of time you practice asanas. So breathing becomes very important, and the vinyasas also become very important in this system, which is not the case in other physical exercises, other form of physical exercises. There, the breath rate goes up. Most of the gym workouts and all that.
Right.
You increase the heart rate. Whereas in here, what they try to do is they reduce the breath rate from the normal 15 to about 4 or 5 per minute. The way we do. You have been in the course. The way we do, we try to reduce the number of breaths per minute. So then later on, when you do pranayama, the total number of breaths that you take starts coming down. And this is a completely different different approach to physical culture. And there is another important aspect of yoga, which you don't find in others, is the inversions. The headstand and shoulder stand, Shirshasana and so they, I think I mentioned to you, with the various koshas in the body, they are attached to the whole body, different parts of the body. And they are all made up of muscles. The supporting musculature is also made up of muscles. So the inversions were a unique invention of the yogis. So you stay in headstand and shoulder stand for a period of time. All the organs which are due to gravity or postural defects, which are getting displaced from their original position, you stay in headstand for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes and shoulder stand for another 10 or 15 minutes. They slowly go back to their original position. And then you try to sit in a seated posture, do your bandhas, and then see this way the yoga approach is much different from the way exercises are being done. So these things are again left out in the modern yoga practice. So and then people have started practicing yoga as if it is a workout. Again they are sweating a lot, there is no control over the breathing, and then one more thing about yoga is kaya klesha varjayet. Kaya klesha means, you shouldn't strain yourself too much, like, heavy body lifting. In fact, it even says that you should not do too many Surya Namaskara. Surya Namaskara is a fairly strenuous exercise. But then you can do Surya Namaskara a few times, maybe 3 times or maybe 5 times. But sometimes, your breath is out of control, you are sweating a lot, but you keep on doing it over and over again, See, this is not the way yoga is supposed to be done. It's a much different approach to the practice of yoga when compared to other forms of physical exercise.
Certainly, if the goal is to reduce the influence of rajas and tamas, then you cannot be too tired, and you cannot be too active. There has to be that progressive clarification of the bioenergy.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah, that's a very important thing for people to understand why what the heart of the sattvic yoga practice is versus the workout yoga practice. Because it offers us a chance to get more in touch with our own healing and our own development in so many different ways.
There is a distinct difference between aerobic approach to health and the yoga approach to health. I mean, I don't say aerobics is bad, but these yogis have a different philosophy.
Well, also, one thing I noticed was that Krishnamacharya has had several students who lived to 100 years old, and he himself, I heard that at his 100th birthday, he gave a 3-hour lecture in Sanskrit, not stopping.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody who has any concern for healing or eating right or whatever we're into here in America, needs to understand that there's a fact that there's 100-year-old disciples of this man.
Right.
And that's a very special thing. Wait, are you going to live to 100?
I know, when you started talking about it, I got worried.
Well, I plan on living to 120.
Okay.
That's my goal.
Good.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you also, it's similar to what we've been talking about, but, what you're describing is the yoga system has a comprehensive, holistic approach to literally all the problems of life, basically. And when we think about Indian wisdom, Indian tradition, we think, okay, the meditation tradition's here, the asana tradition's there, the Ayurveda's there, and then the Jyotish is there. But it's not really true, because isn't it that they are all one body, or how do you describe that?
No, even if you take yoga itself, yoga contributes a lot to health. So Ayurveda has to, in fact, one of the statements is I think one of the Ayurveda texts says that certain diseases which cannot be cured by medication should be chronic ailments should be tackled with the pranayama. So yoga is there everywhere. Yoga is there. So they are all interrelated. Yoga and Ayurveda draw inspiration from another philosophy, Sankhya philosophy. And then the ideas contained in Vedanta are further developments of the ideas contained in Sankhya and Yoga. So they are all related. They are all related.
Interesting.
Yes. So depending upon our requirements,
So if you really took the philosophy of Sankhya,
yes,
then that would be the structure, but the practice manual would be yoga, Vedanta,
No, even Sankhya gives the complete, what you call complete the theoretical basis completely. Mm-hmm. They also talk about how to achieve kaivalya in that, what is the ultimate goal. But then, as I told you, supposing you start at a particular level, you don't find, supposing I'm a beginner, I'm already an evolved yogi, you don't find information of how to proceed in Sankhya. You got to come to yoga.
Oh, okay.
Only yoga gives you all the, the nuts and bolts, that kind of thing, that is there only in yoga. Likewise, Vedantins got their own goal, and then if they want to, a few people can go into Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Savikalpa Samadhi. But many other people like us will have to, even supposing I like Vedanta, but then I'm not able, because there are so many distractions. My mind cannot settle down into that. So I have to take some time every day, about half an hour or so, and meditate on those ideas. That requires that my mind should be focused. I need again asana pranayama. If I want to meditate on an Ishta Devata, again, my mind should be able to concentrate. So everybody needs to come to meditation ultimately, and then I can't do it unless I'm able to take care of the rajas and tamas from my system. Right. I got to reduce them. And yoga very clearly, asanas are supposed to reduce rajas, and pranayama is supposed to reduce tamas. Asanena rajohanti tatakshayate prakashavaranam. So very clearly it says that these two gunas, which are not the most desirable gunas when you want to meditate, should be first tackled by these Hatha Yoga practices.
What's the attitude towards food and nourishment?
Now we see two things mainly. Say Vashikrita Mitasana. These are the two instructions given by Swatma Rama. Vashikrita means you must eat food which is easily digestible. Some food that you eat, you may be able to digest easily. Some food I eat, I will be able to. Then the next one will be Vashikrita Mitasana. You must eat moderately. You should never load the system. These are the two instructions. And of course, because we want to make our mind more and more sattvic, I want to meditate and all that. If I do only asanas, probably I need more rajasic food, because I need a lot of energy. But if I want to go along this, so then I will have to, do only as much of asanas as necessary. So I will have to cut down on my rajasic or tamasic food, and then I should take more of the nourishing sattvic food. What is sattvic food? Again, number of texts talk about it. The Bhagavad Gita talks about it. Ayurvedic texts talk about it. Hatha Yoga Pradipika talks about it. So we have some information about. So depending upon your preferences, you can find out a diet that is most suitable to you, and avoid the rajasic and tamasic diet, or reduce the intake of rajasic and tamasic diets.
What was your experience of in yoga, in the teachings that you have, the relationship with the guru? Because some yoga practitioners, guru, take the knowledge and then leave. It doesn't matter. Others are very devoted to the guru. So how do you...
I will tell you, when I studied with Krishnamacharya, even though, I studied with him for a long period of time, I thought that he had my welfare in his mind. I liked him very well, the way he taught. But then the common thread is the knowledge that he wanted to transfer. There is nothing personal. I didn't get too close to him. In the sense, you don't get involved into personal things of the guru, and all that. So he was taking care of himself. He used to go, and during the 1 hour or whatever they study or chanting or he will be focused completely on transmitting the knowledge. So the only connection between the teacher and the guru should be the knowledge.
For exceptional Ayurvedic content and more innovative videos, follow and subscribe. If you have health concerns and are looking for an Ayurvedic consultation, I give them online over Skype and Google Plus Hangouts. So you can click below and find out more information about how you can set up an appointment. I welcome you to my practice. I'm LA based. When you're in LA, schedule an appointment when you're looking for Ayurveda.